Okay, good morning or afternoon, evening, wherever you are, whenever you catch this. Welcome to this is season 2 of Telling Tall Tales the Right Way. I actually work with words for a living, and sometimes they are still hard. So what I was very excited today because I have Dr. Tachi with me today, and this is her. She's amazing. She's truly amazing. She is a media professor. She is a tech and media founder. She knows all things entertainment, pop culture. She's a journalist, a content creator. She's amazing. And she created Indie Soup Network, which is where you're seeing the show. And I am so grateful to be part of her team of people. And so I'm going to, without further ado, bring her up here. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. What about you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Happy to be here and excited to be on your show.
No, I appreciate you taking the time. This is really exciting for me to have you here because we've talked in other ways about okay, so we're talking about Queen Charlotte. Now,
yes.
Queen Charlotte is part of the Bridgerton universe. So there was season 1, season 2, then Queen Charlotte, and now season 3.
Yes.
And Bridgerton, we all know is like a juggernaut on Netflix. Like it is taken off like rocket ships, right?
Yes.
So we are gonna talk about Queen Charlotte. Here she is.
Yes.
In all her glorious beauty, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so this is Queen Charlotte in her youth. So we're just gonna give a little synopsis of the show. Okay, so Queen Charlotte married to King George III. Yes, American Revolution, King George III. Mm-hmm. In the world of Bridgerton, class is still very much a thing, but race has become less so. And we're not really introduced to why that whole thing is much. I don't remember that. Do you remember? Like, did they mention how all this came to be? Because I know.
So you mean how she came to be, or
no, but like in the world of Bridgerton, there is interracial marriage. There is,
Well, it makes sense historically if you look at it. Not that I am a historian, but if you look at it historically, there were people of color that existed in Europe at that time, of course. And there were some people of color, Queen Charlotte, of course, who was, as they said, of Moorish extraction.
Yes, there she is. See, okay, so I found this picture and I wanted to make sure we use this because if you look in the historical record, as Dr. Tachi was just saying, there's some question about if the real Queen Charlotte was of mixed heritage. And so Shonda Rhimes kind of took that fact and then ran with it in like banana pants ways, right? So okay, so this is the real Queen Charlotte here. This is her. This is the actress who plays her in her youth when she first comes to England from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then this is Queen Charlotte in very abbreviated glory from her older years as she appears on Bridgerton.
Right.
Okay, so let's just run down really fast the elements of every great story as I have defined them. So we have a very clear beginning, middle, and end, albeit the end is one that continues on because in this world of Bridgerton, Queen Charlotte's not dead. She's just older, and then she continues in the seasons.
Yes.
We have a very definitive when and where. So we all know this is the Regency period. That is roughly defined by like, I think 1800 to about 1819 or something.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So we have a very definitive sense of fashion and decor. Lighting is, it's obviously it's filmed now in modern times, so it's lit a little better, but you can imagine how dark it probably was at night, with only candlelight. So we have a very definitive when and where. The what. So the what, as I define it, is the plot. Like, right? Like, what's the what? The plot, the story.
Yes.
Do you want to describe the story?
Yeah. So if we're looking at Queen Charlotte overall, this is obviously the prequel to what we know of Bridgerton, but this is in her youth before we start in the first episode with her getting the arrangements being made for her to become married. So at that time, especially if you were of the aristocracy, you don't just decide who you want to marry.
Right.
Arrangements are made for you. And there's something, I don't know if they alluded to this, and you pay attention to things. So I'm wondering, in that, or in your historical exploits, if you have, like, you have historical exploits, but if you
Wouldn't
have,
it be fun though if we could have historical exploits?
can you imagine? we might change things too much.
For real.
But in your looking at history, because this, obviously, I knew about Queen Charlotte, but I didn't know as deep about Queen Charlotte, and it made me want to look a little bit more historically. I know that there was a habit, especially in Britain, of not even intermarriage, marrying within the family.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of interbreeding.
There's a lot of interbreeding and inbreeding in
Mhm.
that, because they were trying to, quote, keep the lines pure. To their chagrin, that's not what happens when you do that. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if bringing in Queen Charlotte from Germany was a way of combating that.
Yeah, so I don't think that you're wrong, because a lot of times, maybe not so much the nobility, but definitely royalty would look to other countries, but it was also for political gain, right?
That too, yes,
So,
yes.
So women, we were kind of just considered these pawns that, our fathers, or if our fathers weren't around, that our brothers or our uncles could use as like bargaining chips to create better land deals, or in terms of like kings and queens, you create allies and alliances so that if there is war, like, King Henry VIII originally married Catherine of Aragon, who was from Spain. That was a strategic move so that England and Spain were aligned, right? Like they would stick up for each other. So that is part of it. I do think you're right that it is maybe trying to, I don't know the right genetic terminology, but to
widen the gene pool.
Thank you. Yes. I was trying to say that, but
it's not correct terminology, but
yes,
that's all I can think
to
of.
water it down a bit.
Yes.
To water the DNA.
Yes.
So it was for two reasons. It was to create a political alliance, but also to bring in other DNA, even though I'm quite sure that they're probably distantly related in some way, would be my guess.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Right. But in more of immediate terms, in like first cousin, second cousin, I don't think they were that close.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the story, right? This is the story of how Queen Charlotte comes to be Queen Charlotte, but really it's a love story.
It is.
It's and it's beautiful, I think, in many ways, because it shows their flaws, right? Like, I mean, they're both beautiful people. The actors who play King George and Queen Charlotte are beautiful people. And everybody else is pretty handsome too in their own ways, except the doctor, which of course they wanted him to look. But
yes,
but what I think, by giving Queen Charlotte her own, first of all, I think people were clamoring for it, right? Like, they're like, who is this amazing woman who's basically ruling England because King George is off his rocker?
Yes.
Well, and that's another part of it too, right? Like, who all is in the story? Okay, so we have Queen Charlotte, King George's mother. We learn a lot about Lady Danbury also.
Yes.
We
Oh my
learn
goodness.
so much about Lady Danbury. So we can't tell the story of Queen Charlotte without also telling her story a little bit. But most
Exactly.
importantly, I think we learn why King George was mentally ill. And it's not necessarily because he was, I mean, it could have been syphilis and other things, sure, because they didn't have disease prevention and nobody took a bath back then.
Exactly.
But, you know, there's also, I mean, that really stuck out for me. And I forget what episode it was, but to learn the trauma that he suffered as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, back then, I think we have to, we look at things in the perspective of 21st century. That's where we are, right?
Yep.
We haven't crossed over to the 22nd yet.
No, I think we'll all be dead by then anyway. So.
Oh God. But we think of things in very 21st century terms.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes fail to realize that there was not an awareness yet of germs and what they could do. And if there were, it was very little. There was very little awareness of what things like trauma, childhood trauma, and all those things, how they can lead to mental disabilities later on. I mean, we don't even understand mental disabilities now, not to talk of then. So it was very interesting to see, because you're like, oh, okay. Now, and I don't know, I did know that he suffered with mental illness, definitely. The real King George suffered with mental illness.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, there is a romanticized and this is fictionalized version of this based off of some true events, but we don't know to the extent that whatever he suffered affected him later on. We don't know to the extent, but Shonda Rhimes does a very good job of making that bridge, Bridgerton, and making that link. So
no, and so for anybody who hasn't seen it, like I really should just like preface everyone. This is all spoilers, so if you don't want to know and you haven't seen it, you should probably not watch this right now.
Don't watch.
Yeah, don't watch. But this is what we learned. George's mother is sitting down with Lady Danbury. Now, the Lady Danbury in Bridgerton, not Queen Charlotte, Bridgerton, is older, right? She's in her late 50s, early 60s, maybe something, I don't know. Anyway, she is older. So she is her younger self in Queen Charlotte. And they are having a conversation over tea where George's mother reveals that after his father died, they had to go live with his grandfather, and his grandfather abused George terribly, beat him, starved him, whatever. Like those were the two things that were mentioned in particular. And when she's saying that, and you can, the way her body language, she's like folded in on herself, and she's trying not to look at Lady Danbury while she's telling this, she's sipping her tea. It just, all of a sudden the light bulb went off for me about, he suffered this is childhood trauma coming home to roost.
Yes. And also for the mother, there was a powerlessness that you have. What was she going to do?
Right.
At that point, you had no power.
Right. She couldn't defend him lest they both be cast out into the street, and that was a very real possibility, right?
Exactly. So she was thinking about the greater good in this case.
Yes. So then that brings us to the why. Why are we even, like, that's the why of the plot, right? So the story is Queen Charlotte, the love story with King George, and how she comes to be the woman we see her as in Bridgerton. Why is why does this even start? Again, Shonda Rhimes was listening to the people. She knows her market. The marketplace was saying, we want to know about Queen Charlotte. And so that's the whole reason we have this. But again, it goes back to that very first episode that you were mentioning, where I think the whole series even starts where we see this carriage, and Queen Charlotte is in the carriage with her brother. And he's like trying to pep talk her, like, I've heard he's very nice and he's a good man and he's this and that. And she's just rolling her eyes so far back in her head. She's like, sure, let's go with that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you see where the current day Queen Charlotte, the Bridgerton Queen Charlotte, gets all of that from you. We knew very little about her youth before this came up, in the
Right.
Bridgerton world. And so the fact that, even the fact that she tries to run away
She tries
initially,
to go over the
she
wall.
tries to go over the wall. She's like, oh, I'm not staying here.
You're
Bye.
right.
you
Right.
know? And the interesting thing is, had she not done that, tried to do that, that would have changed the entire trajectory of what
Of
we
history.
know of that world.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And then, so we're gonna skip ahead a little bit.
Let's
Okay.
skip ahead.
So now so George catches her trying to go over the wall, but she doesn't know that he's George. She just thinks he's this handsome nobleman, right? She doesn't know. And then when he reveals to her that, oh, by the way, I'm your husband, or husband to be, she's like, hold up, what now?
Right.
Because she's taken aback by, number one, his youth. Number two, the actor who plays him is very handsome.
Yes.
And his kindness and sense of humor. I think those two things in particular are what took her off guard, right? She expected him to be very stuffy and very royal, I guess.
Yes.
And he wasn't. And then they get married. And then it gets real for her.
It's like after the wedding, everybody talked to you. All leads up to the wedding day, and you're getting this dress, and you want this venue, and everything is wonderful. And then all of that is over, and the marriage begins.
Yeah, and for her, it wasn't as if they went to Buckingham Palace and started this beautiful life together. He basically dropped her off at her own castle.
Yes.
And was like, I'll see you later. And went to his own castle.
Exactly. She's like, but I want to go with you.
Right. And
no,
he was
you
like,
can't.
nah. He was like, I'm good. Well, so then we see this montage, right? Okay, so can we just talk about the costuming for a second?
Oh, let's.
Oh my word. Oh my word. If we think Queen Charlotte's costumes in Bridgerton are magnificent creations of whimsy and mechanics, like all kind of thrown together, we see the beginnings of that in the Queen Charlotte series.
Exactly.
Where she has to be dressed in a different outfit for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and she's alone. Like, they redo her jewels. She's got a different crown. She's like, everything is perfectly put together until one day she says, you know what? We're leaving. And she doesn't like leave like I'm going back to Germany leave. She gets in a carriage and she goes to her husband's castle.
Her husband's castle, yes.
And she's like, this is not going to happen, sir. And they get into, and I don't know is this the first time they get into the fight about do you love me? Is this the first time they get into that fight?
It feels like it's a little bit later on.
That's what I thought too. Because I think he convinces her to leave again, but she says no.
Yes.
And then so she stays.
Exactly.
But then she ends up going back to Q. Or no, he was at Q.
Yes, he was at Q. He was at Kew Gardens. She was someplace else at another castle.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, the thing is, I think we need to tell people that there is good reason why he's not wanting her to. I shouldn't say good reason. There is a reason why he does not want her there, and it's because he knows he's not well.
Yeah, he does, and the evidence of it is he has this that I don't know what's that round room called? Solarium. So I don't know.
Where he looks at the stars.
It's got a telescope. He can look at the
stars.
Anyway,
yes. There's a name for it.
Observatory.
Observatory. Yes. It's on the tip of our tongue. Yes, the observatory.
Right there. And we both work with words. Promise, we do. We do. So he's got this telescope. He's got the observatory. But what's and that would, I mean, that's interesting enough, right? But what he's doing then is he's covering the walls with like his observations. He's a genius with mathematics. And so he's got all these equations about like this star is this far away and this planet is this far away. And but he knows that the way that he knows the way his mind works, he understands that he has an issue or several issues. And he just doesn't want to expose her to that. He really wants to keep her separate from that. And in a way, I felt like that was his way of trying to protect her, and not necessarily from him, but from the gossips at court.
Exactly.
So they go back and forth a couple of times. They do spend some time together. She gets pregnant. She's noticeably pregnant. And, is that when she comes back? No, maybe she's not noticeably pregnant at this point. Anyway, she comes back to Kew Gardens where George is, and they have a blowout fight. And you might be a little surprised at that because you're like, did women really shout at their husbands like that back then? But apparently, when you're the Queen of England, you can do that.
You could do that. Can we go back for a moment and not to belabor the point, but before she gets pregnant, remember, there's this whole thing of the point of even getting married is to produce an heir so that you can continue your reign, continue the monarchy. So there's pressure for the women in the aristocracy, not just the aristocracy, but the what are they?
The nobility?
Yes, the nobility to get pregnant, but particularly the king and queen, the direct rulers of the country. There's always pressure for them and their children to get the direct descendants so that they have an heir. And so she wasn't for a while, if you remember.
Yeah, it was hard.
And that was because he was trying purposely not to. Yep. And I think he thought whatever he had was catching or would be carried on down to the child. So he didn't want to do that. So, and she didn't know the process of how a baby is made.
No, and that's another thing too, like woefully uneducated about how children actually come to be.
I don't know if any of them knew, to be fair.
Right. I think I know that, like, obviously they know sex is how you get children, right? But George knew it, but women were kept woefully in the dark about that stuff. Like those conversations were not had with, like, it was just, you just lay there, let him do his thing and have a baby.
Exactly.
That's it. Right. So he was, you're right. So that was another reason he was trying to keep them apart, is so that he almost couldn't produce an heir. And she was like, that's banana pants. What are you talking about? Like, that's my whole job here. And by the way, I love you. Do you love me? And that's when the whole shouting starts.
Yes.
And he keeps saying, you have to leave. You have to leave. And she will not let it go. She's just like, do you love me? You have to leave, blah, blah, blah. Do you love me? You have to leave, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then he finally admits, yes, Charlotte, I love you. And he tells her he has loved her from the minute he saw her trying to go over the wall.
Yes.
And I was like, oh,
what a story, right?
so beautiful. Like, really. And, and it turns out that Charlotte and George had like 8 kids.
Yes.
Eventually. Like, they had 8 children.
Baseball team for real.
So they had like 8 kids in real life. Queen Victoria is their granddaughter. But not like from their first son. I think it was like their daughter or something. Anyway. But what I especially loved, and so we get like, there was like a montage of things where, they're like, we see them, kind of getting older, and George is getting more infirm. He literally can't handle the day-to-day of being a human, much less a king. Thank you so much for joining us. This was part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Tachi about Queen Charlotte. Stay tuned for part 2 coming next week. I hope you're having a great time with this conversation. It honestly was one of my favorites.